Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Issues and Insights program with Pacific Forum. I am David Day, and this is going to be the second in our series here having to do with Chinese investment in the United States. Our last program was exploded with callers from the U.S. mainland, from Asia, and locally here in Hawaii. And we have a lot of interesting material to cover for you today. And participating in this program, we have Mr. Carl Baker, who is the Director of Programs for Pacific Forum. Nice to have you back with us, Carl.
Good afternoon. Good to be back.
And we also have Ting, who is a Honda Fellow, Pacific Forum, if I'm not mistaken, and also the Senior Project Manager for the Bertelsmann Foundation
in D.C.
Based in Washington, D.C.,
yeah.
Right. And Ting was with us at the prior program and Carl wasn't, so maybe for Carl's benefit as well as our listeners, we'll kind of pick up with a quick review of what transpired in the last program. And we were addressing the issue of kind of what is the challenge or the perceived problem with Chinese investment in the United States. And Ting was talking about, as I recall, Ting, the kind of the increasing pace of Chinese investment, and we were using as an example this failed or blocked acquisition of the state-owned oil company in China, CNOOC.
Yep.
With
its acquisition attempt in 2005 of U.S. oil company Unocal. But when we talked about this last time, CNOOC was just recently offered $15.1 billion US in cash to acquire Canada's Nexum, which is another big oil company with a big share in the Gulf of Mexico.
The issues that we talked about in the last program, we touched upon the sensitive area of Chinese investment in national security. And as I recall, we had a caller from Washington emphasizing that issue, the concern there. And we touched upon the issue of potential economic warfare coming out of China. I think during that program, Ting, you may have indicated that concern for economic warfare and your perspective seemed a bit exaggerated.
Yeah, and I think it's not only exaggerated, it's also dangerous to address the investment issue as a warfare, because one, it is still a very small fraction of foreign direct investments that the U.S. is receiving from other countries. It's only 0.3% from Chinese companies right now. Second, there are a lot of benefit provided economically to the U.S. market from the Chinese foreign direct investment. So there might be some small concerns which both sides needs to address, but calling it an economic warfare is something that is very dangerous.
We also had in the last program a caller calling in from Hanoi, from Vietnam, giving kind of a parallel perspective that the Vietnamese have vis-a-vis Chinese investment in their country and having to do with the extraction of resources and bringing in their own labor force and subcontractors, and kind of the concern that they were maybe being taken advantage of. So
yeah, and I think that's not just the concern of that caller, but also a fair concern in general from different countries, recipient countries. This is the same concern has been heard in regions in, for example, Latin America and Africa about resource extraction. I think these are the issues of also regulation in the local recipient countries as well. If there is a good standard for environmental protection and a good legal enforcement in these areas, then the problems will be solved in a much more efficient way.
we also had a caller from Hawaii here, a gentleman by the name of Greg, as I recall, who called in and concern for the perception on his part that the Chinese investors don't come from a rule of law country. They kind of lack a moral compass, and the suggestion was that they may be less cooperative with the U.S. system in one way or another.
I think that that's something that we from the U.S. needs to uphold our legal system, our legal standard, to provide the kind of legal framework that the Chinese investors have to follow. And this is, every country has similar issues to larger or smaller extent, but as long as we hold our own ground firm, then we can deal with these businesses and making the best out of them.
Carl, let me put a question to you here on this thing. You've got the benefit, like me, of a few more years on you here, and you recall back when the Japanese were doing heavy investment in the United States, and there was a perception that they bought Rockefeller Center, for instance, and then this tremendous investment here in Hawaii that the Japanese were going to take over and run our economy, and we were losing Waikiki Beach, and the Japanese management model was the be-all and the end-all. Do you see is this reaction that we're seeing vis-a-vis Chinese investment, is it just a natural product of significant or new foreign investment coming in from a new market, you think?
To some extent, I think it is. I mean, I remember very well back in the 80s when there was this huge paranoia that, not only did they buy Rockefeller Center, but they bought Pebble Beach. And
that's right.
They were going to cart the whole thing back to Japan. And somehow, people were really concerned about it. But I think so to some extent, to answer your question directly, I think, yes, there is some natural concern by Americans when you see people coming to the United States and investing in the country, and you don't know why, and you don't know what really is going to happen because of it. But having said that, I think the difference between the Japanese investors and the Chinese investors is that the Chinese investors don't come from a market economy. They really come from an economy that's run by the state, much more so than Japan ever was. And so you have this sort of mercantilist state that's encouraging its state-run companies to make investments in the United States. And I think that there's a concern that there's actually some security implications behind that. So I think that's the difference. Now, how serious that difference is, I think, is still an open question, because we don't know what the ultimate motivation for some of these purchases are. For example, when the Japanese invested in the United States, they tended to invest in trophy things,
right,
like
icon type thing, yeah.
Yeah, but what we're seeing from the Chinese is a much more systematic approach, where they're really investing in resource-oriented companies, much like they've done in Africa and Latin America.
Or technology-oriented companies, maybe.
Or technology-oriented companies, something that is really both a concern for security and something that seems a very clear pattern of a mercantilist policy that allows them to develop their economy and get some technology and some rights to certain technologies in China.
Let me talk to our audience for a moment here. I know that you're out there in traffic, but feel free to join the conversation. If you've got a question for our experts here, you can call area code 808-296-5467 and join the conversation here. We also want to welcome those of you who are listening on the internet through the streaming feature of KGU 760 AM, the Wall Street Business Network. And let me see if I can summarize what you just said, Carl, because I think it's very significant, and that is that the state-owned enterprise, the government involvement in those companies that are doing the investment changes the nature of the perception on the receiving end here in the U.S. a little bit, or a lot.
Well, it changes it on both ends, because when you look at what the Japanese were doing, the Japanese companies were doing it based on what the company saw as something good for the company.
Right.
where it's not clear to us, or really it's not clear to what China's motivation is in supporting these state-owned companies. Why are the state-owned companies choosing specific industries, and why are they choosing specific countries? I think that's a question. So it's not only a perception question, but it's also a motivation question on the Chinese end.
Interesting. Ting, what's your view of this piece having to do with the state-owned enterprises as the primary drivers of Chinese investment?
Yeah, Carl is right. The Chinese state-owned enterprises are the main driver of its investing force. 2/3 of the foreign direct investment coming out of China are conducted by state-owned enterprises, and particularly large state-owned enterprises. It is a concern for not only America, but also, for instance, in Europe, that these companies, one, as Carl mentioned, have a specific state-driven strategy of the industries that they're picking, but also they may have unfair advantage in getting cheap capitals from the Chinese government subsidy, for instance. So I think these are fair concerns, and this is also a big hurdle for negotiations between the U.S. and China. And this is some area I think the Chinese government needs to do a bit more job in explaining how this model of state-owned enterprises-driven economy is working, and how these enterprises are operating as normal businesses. Because they have been saying that they are also competing with each other, they're competing in the market, but somehow this has not made enough of an assurance with the recipient countries.
So the perspective that you're talking about is that if, for instance, the Chinese had successfully purchased the Unocal, the Union Oil Company, Unocal, and those companies would then be competing with Chevron and others, that investment, right?
That's right.
All right. We'll be back after the break. Stay with us. We got a lot more to come. Well, we are back, and if you noticed listening very carefully to the music and the introduction, guess what? This is not Tuesday. This is Thursday, and we're in the process of a program change here at KGU. And not to worry, our music and announcements and introductions will catch up with us. You can join the conversation by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. And we're talking about the nature of Chinese investment coming into the United States. And at the break, we were kind of summarizing the difference between the Japanese wave that came in the 1980s with their private enterprises and the current Chinese wave that is starting to come into the United States with their government, I guess, invested, controlled, influenced state-owned enterprises, if you will. And Ting, you had a point that you wanted to bring up on the issue of state-owned enterprises that's important here. I think we should discuss.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the kind of concern usually a recipient country would have with regard to the state-owned enterprises-driven Chinese investment model. And I think the Chinese government also needs to further promote the entry of private sector, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises that can compete with this state-owned enterprises, because so far they are still only 1/3 of the outgoing investment from China that are made by private small and medium-sized enterprises. If there are more competition and more participation from these companies from China, then the picture, I think, would look a little bit different, as if the Chinese foreign direct investment is driven by a general state strategy.
Well, here's the challenge. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and you make an excellent point. But isn't the reality that the state-owned enterprises are essentially pieces of the portfolios controlled by the wealthy princelings, and they're the ones that are going to call the shots as to which companies get to go and invest? Or am I mistaken on that?
I think there are the so-called princeling group of people, they are in a lot of the big state-owned enterprises. They are also in a lot of different government section in the Chinese government. But I think if you look at the investment as a business model, it doesn't really matter who is in charge of it, but the general model of the going out strategy, who is participating in that, is what matters for the recipient countries to look at what kind of businesses are coming out and making the investment. So for small and medium enterprises that are also a growing force in the Chinese economy, they need to be encouraged. And actually recent economic policy, particularly in the financial market side, has been indicating this direction. The pace could be faster or may be faster in the future, but capital control has been released to a certain extent recently to make it a little bit easier for private investors to make their investment overseas.
Okay, so let's talk. I want to go back to this issue of the possibility that or the concern on the receiving end of the investment. That would be in whether it's in Vietnam, in the United States, in Germany, wherever. That because these entities are government-owned or heavily government-influenced, that there is the potential for some type of unusual control or, and I'll use the term economic warfare in the future. In other words, the infrastructure, the perception is that the infrastructure could be put into place to do some serious damage economically that could not be done on a military basis. But hear me out on this. So if we go back the last couple months, there was an incident in which, as a consequence of the standoff between China and the Philippines over the Scarborough Shoal incident, that the banana farmers sending products under contract to China, their cargo was blocked or was not unloaded. I don't know the exact details of it, but effectively, because of China's economic control in that region of the Philippines on that product, it was perceived by some as a little bit of economic muscle flexing by China over the Philippines.
Yeah, I think there have been examples that have been used by others. The Filipino agricultural product is one example. If you look at the
Senkaku Islands.
If you look at the Senkaku Island with Japan, over the fishermen's incident, there was the rare earth embargo from China to foreign shipment, and there were also incidents after the Nobel Peace Prize lottery was put on in Norway. China has imposed extensive investigation into Norwegian salmon. These are some examples you can look from the perspective of economic warfare, but I think we should also look at the kind of tools we can use, because it's a international economic system that everybody has to follow the rules. If you're doing something that's not following the rule, then there would need to be mechanisms that can address these disputes.
Okay,
Given the example of the rare earth embargo, U.S., EU, and Japan have put on a lawsuit against China in the WTO and has won this legal suit. Norwegian government have also put the dispute over their salmon into WTO. That's why we need to emphasize the rule of which we have to play by.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think, Carl, you had something you wanted to add here on this? I mean, I don't want to take the position completely that there's an insidious web that's being spun here, because as a policy matter, we need to encourage foreign investment, I think. But so...
Yeah, I mean, all I wanted to say was that, we need to be careful when we use the word economic warfare, I think, because the United States would be a country that also uses its muscle, if you will, to force countries to follow U.S. policy.
Okay.
I mean, look at
That's
what
a
we
fair
do.
point.
Look at what we do with human rights. Look at what we do with
Sanctions.
with
Yeah,
sanctions
sure.
for all kinds of things. So
Right.
so China isn't the first country in the world who uses its economic muscle. And that's just a point that I think needs to be remembered, that we shouldn't look at China as doing something unique in that they feel that they have the right, if you will, to do those kinds of things in response to countries that basically
They disagree
with.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and then the other thing is, on just as a side note on the Philippine banana issue, in fact, you know, it made big headlines that it stopped these banana imports. But a couple weeks, a month later, in fact, there was more negotiation between the Philippines and China over poor warehousing conditions for bananas in Mindanao. And so, in fact, you know, there was apparently a problem with poor quality control in those agricultural products in the Philippines. So while it may very well have been, you know, sort of a knee-jerk reaction, the fact is that it led to better quality control in some of those of those warehouses, and there were Chinese that actually went to the Philippines and looked at how they could improve those conditions. So it's not. I don't think it was a straight. This is an economic retaliation. That in fact there was a problem, and they chose to highlight it at that particular
The timing
time.
issue.
Yeah, and so it was
Okay.
possibly a timing issue as much as it was a real underlying issue.
Let's kind of move to a different area here, and I think it's important for our audience to understand. I mean, there people out there driving in traffic. They're thinking, oh my God, what is there any kind of regulatory oversight over inbound investment coming into the United States? And so, Ting, what can you run down very quickly? What have we got here in the United States that looks at inbound foreign investment?
Well, I think you are mostly talking about on the national security front, what kind of mechanisms we have to check the potential deals from foreign investors. We have several different agencies that will look into this. Carl can talk probably a little bit more about export control, which was under the supervision of State Department, I believe. And also Commerce Department has, plus Treasury has oversight into financial transactions of companies that may have deals with countries that we have sanctioned.
Okay, so that would be like a North Korea example.
Or Iran. We also have the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., which is known as CSIS. This is a body that is composed with secret members, but led by the Treasury Secretary. They usually compose of members from Treasury, from Congress, from Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, perhaps State Department, that are related to the deals and who would provide the kind of expertise in terms of investigating into a deal, whether it would be a threat to national security.
So why are the members secret?
Because there could be a lot of commercial interest-driven influence into how the decision is made. This committee usually investigate into merge and acquisition deals that foreign companies are trying to acquire in the U.S. and it could acquire certain technology that might be of national threat to the U.S. national security.
And who does this committee report to? I hear that music. We'll be back after the break, and we'll let you know who this mysterious committee reports to. Stay with us. Chinese investment in the U.S., friend or foe, part 2. We're back. You're listening to Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. We're talking about Chinese investment in the U.S., friend or foe, and at the break we started to talk about the CFIS, Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, this membership of a secret committee, which we were kind of joking between us during the break that it might be really the Rockefeller Commission, or what was it, the other one, Carl?
The Trilateral.
The Trilateral Commission there, that's right. But Ting, who does this, seriously now, okay? Seriously, we're on the air, we got people listening.
Right.
And don't tell me it's a secret, okay? Who does this committee report to?
Well, the committee can...
Or supervise or oversight?
Right. The committee will, after the investigation, it will make recommendation in terms of whether they think this deal should go through or not. And then the president has the power to veto their recommendation. And this has not happened in history. So I would say this would report to the president for the decision, but usually when they make a recommendation that this deal should not go through, then that means unless the president intervenes, this deal is going to fall apart.
Okay, and so if we go back to the kind of the foundation of this program, the case study of the Chinese National Oil Company, CNOOC, the attempted acquisition of Unocal back in, when was it, 2005, that was blocked. Was this committee?
I think it wasn't even, it was this committee that went into the investigation, but I don't think the committee came out and finally recommended. I could remember it wrong, but sometimes you don't have to have the committee to go through the last process to say we don't recommend it. If it looks like it's not going to go through, sometimes a company, and most of the times the investor will just withdraw from the deal.
Okay, so then let's then flip over to Canada. This deal has not been approved for the same Chinese state-owned company, CNOOC, to take over the Canadian firm Nexen,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, right now, this deal will be under the review of both Canadian regulators and the U.S. regulators, because the deal has a part of Gulf of Mexico share, and that will be the part that the U.S. regulators, including CFIUS, will be reviewing. On the Canadian side, the Chinese company have taken extensive preparation into getting the trust from the Canadian regulators. They have agreed to move the headquarter of the company's North America headquarter into Canada, and also have agreed to list the company in Canadian Stock Exchange.
Okay.
So these are the measures that would provide more assurance for the local regulators that the company is here to stay, and the company is here to give benefit to the local community.
Interesting. We've got a caller on the line, and let me see if Greg, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
It's great to hear you. Thank you for calling in. Where are you calling from, Greg? Interesting. Okay. Any reaction to that, team?
Yeah, Greg. I think the Chinese company is not the only one who has been trying to take over a U.S. port. That's, for example, was it Dubai? Before that was trying to take over the U.S. port near Connecticut, if I remember correctly. And that was one of the reasons in CFIUS this type of deal was listed for under more sort of civilians under the U.S. regulators.
Oh, what does that mean?
Means that this type of deals will be more carefully reviewed by CFIUS committee. They have added some additional rules into what constitutes of potential threat to national security. And that deal offered by Dubai was actually blocked. So I guess there is some reason that we haven't seen the Chinese shipping company taking over the U.S. port yet.
Well, I mean, sure, there's always that possibility, although I think that it's a bit overblown, because they are still required to follow the regulations and
in the United States
and laws in the United States, and so there's a limit on how far they can go with that before someone in the United States finds a lawyer and takes action against it. So it's a concern. And then finally, I would just say that while it's true, they also have to compete in a market, and I think that the United States still does a pretty good job of winnowing out people who are not able to compete in a market.
Okay, Ting, how about you? React to that?
Yeah, I think, Greg, you are mentioning the kind of concerns a lot of people in the government also shares, as I have heard before. And I think it's a legitimate concern in terms of what kind of special advantage does state-owned enterprises have from China. That's why earlier I mentioned that I think they need to do a better job in bringing out the transparency and sort of let the U.S. regulators understand how that system works. It is true that state-owned enterprises are in a lot of industries in China as well, but as far as I know, they also have to compete amongst themselves. About 10 years ago, a lot of them went bankrupt. And for the kind of advantage that these enterprises might have from the government, I would also want to just remind us that when the Japanese company were taking over a lot of investment in the U.S. back in the 80s, we have heard similar kind of concerns. Perhaps not with regard to state-owned enterprises, but with the big corporation groups that are backed by that have entrenched interests with the Japanese government, and that has also been part of the big concern of Japanese company taking over the U.S.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for joining the conversation, and to the rest of our audience, you can follow Greg's example and join us at area code 808-296-5467. And we need to get to, I think, we need to talk about some ways to go forward here and some policy changes. So let's talk first, before we get into tools that could be used to help this process, Ting. What is the overarching policy that you think the United States needs to articulate with respect to inbound foreign investment coming into the country?
I think there are three areas we need to emphasize, clarify, or improve. First is that we need to cultivate our domestic environment that is business friendly and encourage foreign direct investment. And this is something that has benefited the U.S. economy tremendously.
Sure, historically, that's absolutely correct.
Right. So, for example, our corporate tax is significantly higher right now than a lot of the developed market, comparing to Germany, for instance, to UK.
Well, and also compared to Canada. Big difference.
Canada as well. And similar markets such as Germany has quite high labor efficiency, high productivity of laborers. And granted, the U.S. also traditionally have had pretty high productivity of labor in skilled laborers, but this is also the area that we need to continue to improve because, for instance, Germany is higher than the U.S. right now. So that's from the domestic environment part.
So you're talking about two things there, a change in tax policy and an increase in labor competitiveness and productivity.
Right.
Okay.
As two examples, there are a million things we could
okay.
do to improve that. The other thing is we need to send a strong signal to countries, not just like China, but in general, that the U.S. welcomes foreign direct investment, and we need to prevent protectionism entrenched into the market.
Okay, so we'll show you some tools when we come back, or we'll talk about some tools, way to get there from here. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break. We are back. We are live, and we are broadcasting from the new ThinkTech bunker in the heart of downtown Honolulu. We are no longer staring down Scott Dewar. Scott, if you're listening over there at the Australian consulate, I can't see you anymore because we're in the bunker. And you can join the conversation by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. We are talking about the challenge of Chinese investment coming into the United States. And with us, Mr. Carl Baker from Pacific Forum, the Director of Programs, and Ms. Ting Shu, who is a Honda Fellow at Pacific Forum and also a senior project manager with the famous German ThinkTech Think Tank. Boy, I got to be careful. You know, Jay Fidel's going to shoot me for that one. Think Tank based out of Washington, the Bertelsmann Foundation.
That's right.
So, Ting, we've talked about the situation with the secret committee, CSIS, that is, you made it very clear that it's not the Rockefeller Commission and it's not not
Trilateral.
not the Trilateral Commission, but it is a secret commission that reviews questionable deals with potential national security implications inbound into the United States. Okay. And you've articulated a need for the United States to make very clear the open door policy to welcome foreign investment, the need for a change in tax policy, among other things, and improving the competitiveness of our labor force. Let's talk about maybe if you could, and let me just kind of convert you to a kind of a Walt Disney type thing. If you could use your imagination, what is it that the United States could do to assist a potential investor from any country, Chinese or whatever, so they don't get in a situation where they're rejected?
Yeah, so the good thing about our country is that the legal system is very advanced and the regulatory system is quite in detail, so it serves as guidelines, but also serves as a point of confusion for people who don't really know about the business environment.
And fear, too, you know.
Exactly.
Careful, that's a lawyer talking.
So I think actually the Obama administration recently have established a new agency called Invest USA under Commerce Department.
Okay.
And this is the agency that looks at tools and communications that can bring further understanding and help promote investment into the U.S. And they have done work with the state government. Then they have also done a lot of work with foreign investors as well. This is the kind of activities I think in the longer term will really pay off for our strategy of attracting foreign businesses, because you need to, from the federal side, somebody needs to know who to ask if they have a question or who to consult if they have concerns.
Is that what this Invest USA does?
They provide information.
Okay.
They're still a small agency, but their members and influencers are expanding this year. But I think we should do more of this. We should do not just Invest USA, but we should think of innovative ways to inform potential investors.
Well, like what? How would we do that?
So, for example, we could put a platform, an online platform. So if I were an investor sitting in southern China somewhere, I'm thinking I have this cash in my bank account.
You have too much cash and you need to spend it.
I would like to find a good environment, profitable business, but I don't know how to get into the U.S. Then I go to this website, I look at the platform, I put in my information, or I look for the information of the potential kind of deal. This also can be conducted as investment fair, an online investment fair, for example. And then there would be guidelines of, say, we can read about the regulatory system, what kind of businesses are no-go, and what are the areas that need to be careful. And additionally, you can have more information about the U.S. legal system, what kind of law firms you can ask to consult with, what kind of consulting firm in different areas, in different states you can talk to, and make this an interactive platform. It's just a thought, but I think we can think of many innovative ways to bring the understanding of the business and legal environment of the U.S. to potential foreign investors.
Okay. So the concept, one concept would be to have an interactive, if you will, internet platform that provides a lot of information for the prospective investors, so they don't perhaps get involved with, let's say, a software design company that has national security implications that they may run into trouble with.
Yeah, or they know what to check when they are looking for the business to invest.
And so today, let's say on this program, which is now being broadcast globally, there are prospective investors sitting in China listening to your voice right now. And so there is no platform. And so temporarily, until the Ting platform has been built, I know that the Chinese investor, if they would listen to my voice right now, what they should do is contact the nearest U.S. consulate or embassy and get a hold of a U.S. commercial service officer in the nearest consulate or embassy. They can do that by internet or telephone if you're listening to me, and they can provide much the same information, not as quickly as Ting is suggesting, but over time, you know, they can assist in kind of a marriage broker function and directing them to consultants and so forth.
Also, a lot of consulting firms and legal firms are currently operating in China as well, foreseeing the kind of increase in potential investment. So these are the very experienced professionals that traditionally in the U.S. it's a big advantage the U.S. business have, but I think it's going to take some time process for the Chinese investors to get used to the role of this type of professionals.
Sure, and that's because they probably don't use them, or they don't use them as frequently or as much internally operating within China. So it's a bit of a cultural business shift they need to make.
Right, exactly.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it seems to me that a good international attorney based out of Beijing would be able to help them as much as the commercial services officer at the local consulate.
Right, and I think this kind of business is growing, both inside the U.S. Of professional services targeting at Chinese firms that are coming in, and also providing services locally for the potential investors.
Okay, so we have time for one last question. Let me put this to the two of you. Was the blocked investment by CNOOC, was that a good thing for the United States, or was it a bad thing? What do you think?
I don't know the details, and so my answer is a bit superficial because I don't know, exactly the details of what they were buying when they were buying Unocal.
Well, let's just assume they were getting the whole kit and caboodle.
It probably was a draw. I don't know if it was good or bad, because there's good aspects of drawing in foreign capital, and there's bad aspects of drawing in foreign capital. Unocal isn't the only oil company in the United States, and it doesn't really control security resources. So I think that I'm going to say neutral.
Okay, Ting, can you
That's a very diplomatic.
Very diplomatic. Well, he is a diplomat. What do you think?
Well,
Good or bad?
because CFIUS is secret, so I don't know what kind of talk has been
course.
through when they have made the kind of recommendation. But to me, my impression is that this deal, this particular one, different from the other deals that have been blocked, I think has a quite large of business interests that have been influencing the kind of decision, and the media has been reporting it, making it a bigger deal than it was. So
you think there was a U.S. competitors in the industry, the energy industry, there was an interest that they had in blocking the ability of the Chinese government to compete with them, which is what would have happened if Unocal had been acquired.
And that's the case in many other merger and acquisition deals. So I would say it is a missed opportunity.
Okay, a missed opportunity.
For $19 billion.
Okay, all right. And as an overarching policy, we ought to be encouraging foreign direct investment in the country, and we've got to find a way to keep the investment out of the sticky national security area, bottom line.
I think national security is serious, and we need to find a better way to address it.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. Remember now, Thursdays are Asia Days, and I'll see you down the road. Please have a safe drive home.